Welcome, everyone. I'm Andrew Conley with Clean Fuels Ohio. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a second. Make sure everybody gets logged in. You are logged in meeting mode, which means you do have control of your audio and video. So please be mindful of that. Feel free to share your video if you'd like, but please stay on mute to make sure we can hear our presenters. So we've got others logging in here, just catching up on letting everybody in, and we'll get started in just a moment. Again, just the housekeeping note, everybody does have control of their audio and video, so please stay muted during the presentation, but we'd love to connect and talk at the end of this. So with that, as I said, I'm Andrew Conley with Clean Fuels Ohio. Thanks for joining us today to hear about the work Clean Fuels Ohio is doing with the Ohio Turnpike and a variety of stakeholders to plan for the next phase of alternative fuel corridors. With that, I'm going to kick us off into our agenda here. Many of you know us, but for those of you who don't, Clean Fuels Ohio, we are a nonprofit clean cities coalition for the state of Ohio, which means we're supported by the U.S. Department of Energy. Our mission is to improve the transportation sector by helping with an inclusive range of efficiency technologies and alternative fuel technology portfolio for both fleets and increasingly motorists, now that there's more and more options in the individual consumer market. Our goal is really to help fleets and motorists adopt cleaner, more sustainable options for their vehicles to establish better economic operations and better environmental operations for their fleet vehicles. So that is our goal, and we are fuel and technology inclusive in that work. So today we're going to cover the I-80 project. We're going to hear from Marianne Mintz with Argonne National Lab, as well as from Jenna Ellingson from our staff. And then we're going to hear a little bit more about our partnership with Intertrust and how Intertrust CleanGrid demo is helping us and could help others of you in any EVSE and other planning that you're doing. We're going to cover some additional planning and funding resources, then open it up for some feedback, question and answer, as well as just input from all of you. So again, everybody is in control of your own audio and video. So appreciate everyone for staying on mute as we get through the front end of our presentations here. So with that, I'd like to welcome Marianne Mintz from Argonne National Lab to tell us a little bit about the multi-state project that we're playing a part of. Marianne?
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you everybody for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be here to talk with you about this really exciting project. We started working on this several years ago with Clean Fuels Ohio, as well as 6 other Clean Cities coalitions that spanned all the way from the New York border, the border between New York and New Jersey, all the way to the Nebraska border. And the idea was to make an alternative fuels corridor out of Interstate 80, that eastern stretch of Interstate 80. We were involved in the initial designation of the corridor as an alternative fuels corridor for all fuels. And that was in the first round, I believe, of the FHWA designation process. They've now gone through 5 rounds of that process, and there are corridors all across the country now. We also were involved with Clean Fuels Ohio and the same coalitions in designating I-70 as another corridor. And after that work, we then initiated a proposal with the coalitions and the individual state departments of transportation to receive funds from FHW, Federal Highway Administration, to turn portions of the I-80 corridor from what they call corridor pending to corridor ready, meaning that they would then be ready to fuel alternative fuel vehicles for CNG and for electric vehicles. That's high-powered, fast charging for electric vehicles. And that is the project that we're talking about today. That involves, as I said, the 7 coalitions, as well as the departments of transportation. Also, Trillium Loves is a supporting partner on this work. and also a number of other entities that, for example, the jurisdictional entities, the Indiana Toll Road Concession, the Illinois State Toll Highway Authority, the Ohio Turnpike and Infrastructure Commission, and the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. So there are a number of entities involved in this work, and it's a very complicated project because we have so many states involved and so many individual jurisdictions, but it's a very exciting one in that we're trying to turn it from corridor pending to corridor ready along stretches where there simply is not sufficient infrastructure at this point to support the FHWA's requirements for an alternative fuel corridor. So on the PEV side, we're looking at mostly light duty, but also heavier duty. And on the CNG side, we're looking primarily at heavy duty vehicles. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Jenna.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm leading the efforts in Ohio through Clean Fuels Ohio on our work on the I-80 corridor. So the work that we've done to date is we started out identifying all the existing CNG and DC fast charge stations along I-80 using the Alternative Fuel Data Center that is hosted by the Department of Energy, using data from Oregon National Labs and from the Ohio Turnpike and Infrastructure Commission. And with that data, we started locating some potential stakeholders. And through that, for outreach, we wanted to develop some one-pagers that we would be able to share with stakeholders and businesses in the Turnpike about implementing DC fast charging stations and CNG stations. So we created some informational flyers for them. And next, we started reaching out to some stakeholders. So we researched and identified some potential fleet adopters along the corridor that might be interested in adopting CNG or electric vehicles that could become host stations. And we also were looking at municipalities along the corridor. Additionally, I reached out to the MPOs and Council of Governments that have jurisdiction over the corridor to conduct outreach to their stakeholders. And with that information, we have informed stakeholders about the project and about how they could become involved. And lastly, we are working with Intertrust. Intertrust is a member of Clean Fuels Ohio, and they are using their CleanGrid technology to help us compile and aggregate a bunch of data sets that we are using to help inform our mapping of future stations along the corridor in Ohio. So with that, I am going to pass it over to the Intertrust team. We have Rob Adamson, Sung Chung, and Ilya Kamushkin from Intertrust.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're pleased to be here with you all and wanted to give you a little background on who Intertrust is. My name is Rob Adamson with Intertrust, and I've been one of the contacts working closely with Jenna and Andrew and the team at Clean Fuels Ohio, as well as a few folks at Aragon and a few others that are involved in this entity or this initiative. Intertrust's been around a while, founded in 1990. So we've certainly iterated through the evolution of the interoperability requirement, where shareholders are very heavily focused on energy with E.ON and Energy, as well as Origin Energy, as well as some high tech. We're known as a leader in security, privacy and trust for open networks and service-enabled devices. We're a trusted distributed computing technology provider. We've got a strong foundation in digital rights management and secure interoperability. And this is a perfect use case of what's happening here with the I-80 EV initiative, of what that needs to look like. So we're excited to be at this juncture. We've got a heavy R&D emphasis in our organization. We've got a Turing Prize recipient, which is the equivalent of a Pulitzer in technology, and Bob Tarjan, who's very well documented and leads the charge with how we navigate one of the contributing factors of how the technology evolved where it is today. Strong emphasis in energy, IoT, and automotive, which, as you can imagine, are the topics of today, and the data platform. So certainly world-class management across the board to achieve these things that we've been able to bring to the table to work with you on this initiative. Next slide. These are the listing of our stakeholders. World Innovation Lab, huge venture capital company, as I mentioned, Origin and E.ON, huge European energy companies, Europe and Australia, as well as the technology companies and healthcare functions that cross the board, as we've all become aware this year with all we've encountered with regard to healthcare. So those things being said, I'll hand it to Sung and Ilya to give you a little deeper dive of the technology.
Thanks, Rob. So yeah, I want to just quickly, so my name is Sung Chen, and I lead the solutions team here at Intertrust. And I just want to give you a quick introduction to the Intertrust platform. Basically, we provide a suite of technologies that allows organizations to securely share data without having to lose control of your data. And we do this with these three main components. With data virtualization, there's basically no need for you to duplicate or copy your data to some centralized location. Our platform allows you to virtualize and securely share your data with other organizations while still having full governance control on who can access that data. We also provide a secure execution environment where workloads or algorithms can be run without exposing any sensitive data to your external partners. All transactions are also captured in our audit services, and we also offer a cost-efficient, low-latency time series database to store large volumes of data, such as those that are generated from IoT devices. Now, typically, most organizations will have multiple disparate data storage systems across various infrastructures, such as on the cloud or on-premise. And when you want to share data, you might currently be just exporting some of your data and just sending over a copy of that data to your external partners. And at that point, you basically lost control of that data. And so the benefit that the Intertrust platform provides here is that we can provide a trusted data solution where multiple parties can interoperate against a single point of connection to all the various data systems while still having full governance controls over your data. But in today's demonstration, we'll be showcasing our CleanGrid toolkit, and this is a solution that is developed on top of the Intertrust platform. So you get all the benefits of all the security benefits that the platform provides. This toolkit allows utilities and other stakeholders, such as Clean Fuels Ohio, to share data and collaborate with partners so as to help meet energy transition demands. So with that, I will hand it over to Ilya for a quick demonstration on how Clean Fuels Ohio is utilizing this toolkit. Ilya?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sung. Let me share my screen. It's going to come up in a second. My name is Ilya Hamushkin. I'm a solutions architect at Intertrust, and it's a pleasure to demo the application we built on top of the Intertrust data platform for energy sector. So we originally built it for grid management, for electrical asset management, so as electrical asset management solution. But now we've seen we can apply it to much broader set of use cases, and very exciting opportunity with CleanGrid Ohio, Clean Fuels Ohio to explore this as well. So as Sung mentioned, our platform enables data integration, data assimilation, and one second. Oh, my Zoom is acting a little bit. Yep, all set. Data integration, assimilation, and distribution. And platform makes it a seamless process. So with this CleanGrid application, is just an example of what kind of application we can build on top of the platform. Let's just dive into it. And I want to start from this left sidebar here. And you can see the list of layers here. Every single layer in this list belongs to a data set. A data set within the platform could be an Excel file or CSV file, could be a database in the office or in the cloud or any other cloud data storage. So let's start by looking at the north of the state of Ohio. And I want to bring the major highways data set here. Right now it's filtered by I-80 because it's most relevant for this particular case. Let me zoom out a little bit. First of all, I want to bring alternative fuel stations data set, which contains a lot of EV charging infrastructure. As you can see, urban areas like Cleveland and Toledo, I hope I pronounced it right, have the most charging capacity there. Currently, 1 second. Now we can overlay, additionally to this charging information, we can look at the EV registration data, which comes from Argonne National Labs. So this data is aggregated by counties, and we can see that there are certain hotspots that underserved. For example, city of Fremont and Port Clinton obviously have quite high number of registered EV vehicles, but very few charging stations. Port Clinton has just 2, and Fremont just has 1. Now, if we look at the traffic metrics, let me clean the viewport a little bit and look at the average daily traffic metrics. We can see that both of these cities are pretty heavily used in terms of traffic volume. And probably it's because of, additionally to I-80, there is also Highway 6 and Highway 20 passing through that area. So that means that this area is ripe for improvements. Now, after looking at the potential demand, let's look at grid capacity in this area. So let me bring back major highway and transmission lines, as well as grid substations. So if you can, as you can see, the city of Fremont has quite a few high voltage substations, which makes it possible to connect, which basically creates capacity from the grid standpoint to install additional charging here. Excuse me. The bonus of this location is that it's pretty close to I-80. This is kind of analysis, visual analysis we can run using this platform. And as you can see, just in a few minutes, we found out this kind of a little opportunity for the improvement in this particular area. Now I want to switch over to other set of data, which is demographic and social data, because in many cases, it could help make even better decision. Let me clean the viewport again. Since we already focused on city of Fremont, I just want to bring opportunity zones data. And as you can see, the north of the Fremont, northeastern part, has designated as an opportunity zone by US government, which means there could be additional incentives for creating EV infrastructure here. Now, I want to zoom out to the big picture again and try other social demographic data. let's look at the transportation energy burden, which defines a percent of household income spent on energy use for transportation. As you can see, there are a few red kind of areas that have pretty high energy burden. So for this particular example, I want to use city of Cleveland because it's a densely populated urban area. So let's look at this hotspot here on the right. I'm going back to print out EV registration data again and charging stations. Obviously, as many other cities and urban areas, city of Cleveland pretty well covered by charging stations, and obviously has pretty relatively high level of EV registration. Now I want to bring the opportunity zones data set additionally, and now the picture becomes a little bit busier, but you can still see the area here that both has high level of energy burden as well as part of the opportunity zone, and it lacks of charging infrastructure. So it gives us a few insights here. First of all, there is an opportunity to install more chargers, but as we can see that energy burden is high, likely this area doesn't have too many EV car owners. So what we can create out of this is various community outreach programs and surveying, and basically create incentives to help people switch over to electric vehicles because they're more economically viable, and they can reduce some of that transportation energy burden, as well as create economical opportunities for these communities because they are designated as opportunity zones. Now, let me clear this again, and I want to cover one more use case. So this is all possible because we integrated data from multiple sources. Currently, we have 14 data sets, and just 4 of them were integrated a few days ago. Our platform allows to assimilate this data without actually copying any data anywhere. So as I mentioned in the beginning, and as Sang presented earlier, we have this data virtualization toolkit that allows to connect to the data that hosted by multiple parties without copying this data over into the platform. So what that means is that if you have a multi-party collaboration, you can easily connect various databases. Before sharing the data, you can actually slice it using various criteria filtering to reduce or subset the data you want to share. And in this example, I created a restricted data set called Ohio substations. It's similar to substations, grid substations that we've seen a few minutes ago, but now it's restricted by the area of state of Ohio. And this technique called geofencing is pretty common. And in our case, it's really easy to use it because the restrictions are defined within the platform, while the data resides on the customer side or third-party side. So I have a second tab here that actually logged in as a different user, just to give you an example. So this is my user A, and this is the very same tool loaded with user B. Has different email here. And as you can see, the user B has different access restriction. So in this case, it's just an area around I-80. So if we bring I-80 back, we can see that this is just cover state of Ohio and adjacent areas along I-80. Now, if I bring this very same Ohio substations data set, you can see that its restriction allows to see only substations within this area. So same data set, Ohio substations, but different access rights for different users. And that creates an opportunity for multi-party collaboration where everybody in control of their own data, and they participants of the platform could restrict what subset of data they would share with everybody else within the same organization or along different organizations. With that in mind, I'm giving mic back to our leaders, and yeah, thank you for opportunity to present this.
Yeah, thanks Ilya and Sung and Rob. So one of the reasons why we want to collaborate with Intertrust is because of all those challenging overlaps of partnerships that Marianne mentioned, as well as overlaps of data sets within the project. So in particular, things like utility grid capacity data are pretty essential to planning EVSE deployments. And those are very sensitive for Homeland Security and other infrastructure security reasons to keep restricted. So things like this kind of planning project, whether done by state DOT, the Turnpike Authority, the utility, a local municipality, there's multiple layers of overlap there where someone like a utility could give access to just that specific Turnpike Authority or specific city of Fremont, a restricted view of some of this data. So this is really helping us not just stack data as Ilya and the team just displayed, but also potentially providing ways for secure sharing of that data with various parties, whether those be utilities. I see a lot of action in the chat around networking providers for charging stations. So, someone like a ChargePoint or Greenlots could share data of the whole state of Ohio, but say anyone with a city of Fremont official ID can see that for the city of Fremont, or the Turnpike could see that along, the Turnpike, for example. So because of both the interoperability of the data that allows us to stack it together, as well as the security profiles of the data, it's really a powerful tool, as was just demonstrated, helping us both see use cases and key priorities for deployment, as well as for partnering with all the various parties that can be involved in any of these planning projects. So that was some of the reasons why we're partnering with Intertrust and how the tool is helping us. I want to touch briefly on some funding opportunities available to fleets. As Jenna mentioned at the top, our goal isn't just to do this in the abstract, it is to interact with all of you as stakeholders around the Turnpike, understand what your needs are, not just pick a point on the map, but know that there's actual interested local stakeholders who want that kind of fueling station and want to use those kind of vehicles. So before we get into the feedback session, I just want to highlight a few things from our standpoint. One is that, Clean Fuels Ohio, part of our focus is on providing consulting services to fleets. So we've been doing this for 20 years now around fleet analysis and planning, helping secure grant funds for deployment. We're also doing a range of infrastructure planning projects, as well as technical support like mechanic and electrician training to support EV and natural gas vehicle maintenance and station installation. I want to highlight two projects that we're working on that'll bring some of these analysis capabilities and our expertise to qualifying fleets for no charge. One of those is supported through the U.S. Department of Energy, awarded to the Transportation Energy Partners, which is a national organization. And this program is called Drive Clean Rural USA. So it's targeted to stakeholder fleets in any rural designated county. So if we look at the Turnpike, obviously the Toledo metro area and the Cleveland metro area are not rural, but many of the points in between along I-80 are designated rural areas. Our goal is we're working to recruit 3 county hand raisers to participate in those. Once we identify those 3 final counties, we will bring a series of analysis resources to the public fleets in those counties, as well as a free alternative fuel vehicle demonstration program. So you could demo for yourself natural gas or electric vehicles, as well as a range of others. So if you are in a rural county along I-80 or even otherwise, please contact us. We'd love to hear from you and potentially work with you through this Drive Clean Rural USA project. In addition to that, Clean Fuels Ohio is working closely with Power a Clean Future Ohio, which is an initiative funded by some private foundations, including the Energy Foundation, designed to work with local governments to take the lead on climate action. So local governments, it's basically free for you to join as any political jurisdiction, but you do have to pass an executive or council level or whatever your equivalent body is action to actually take climate reduction steps. Once that action is passed, you join Clean Fuels or Power Clean Future Ohio for free, and then you have access to free resources. So there's several different buckets that Power Clean Future Ohio supports to drive carbon reductions. One of those is around transportation, and Clean Fuels Ohio is a funded resource to provide free fleet assessments, tongue twister there, as well as infrastructure planning support for local governments. There are other categories of funding like building energy efficiency, waste management, and land use policies. So if you are a public jurisdiction of any kind, whether that be village, township, city, county, you can join Power Clean Future Ohio for free if you have the corresponding carbon reduction goals in place. You can see we are growing the number of Power Clean Future Ohio leading communities. These are the ones who have joined to date. It is growing by the minute. I'm seeing in the background of my messages another cities poised to announce any day now. So would welcome more leading communities in Power Clean Future Ohio, and resources are growing to support, including if fleet analysis and infrastructure planning is your goal, then Clean Fuels Ohio is available to support you once you join. In addition to that, don't want to fail to mention that the Ohio EPA has their Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund application open now for DC fast charging stations in 26 qualifying counties across Ohio. A number of those are in the I-80 region. So deadline is next year in early 2022, but the RFP is open, and this will fund publicly available DC fast charging stations with the goal of filling in gaps on Ohio's transportation corridors. So really dovetails nicely with the planning work on the I-80 project. All the details on the program are available at the EPA's website, and full webinars from them to hear about all the ins and outs of what it will fund. It will fund whether you are a private entity, private business, or a government. You are both eligible, but the station has to be publicly available to motorists. That's the key requirement. There's a little different funding amounts depending on whether you are a private entity or a public government. But it's a great opportunity. They had a similar round for level 2 charging. You can see that they were shooting for and got pretty close to 50-50 between governments that they funded to install level 2 chargers and private entities that they funded. The privates just a little bit higher in the percentage. So certainly governments are eligible. And if you're looking at hosting a DC charging station, this is a great opportunity to get funding if you're in one of their eligible counties. Certainly, there are competitive grants from entities like the U.S. Department of Energy and U.S. DOT, as well as the utilities in Ohio have submitted varying rate cases. AES, formerly Dayton Power and Light, has been approved with a $5 million rate case moving forward for investments in EVSE, as well as Duke Energy has a submission of a $15 million rate case pending approval from the Public Utilities Commission. AEP is just wrapping up a $10 million rate case in investments in EVSE with future plans to submit another rate case, and First Energy is working on the potential for a future rate case submission as well. So feel free to connect with Clean Fuels Ohio or your local MPOs as well, who know all about these funding sources and more. Your MPOs are your metropolitan planning agencies, with TMACOG in Toledo and NOACA in Cleveland being the two major MPOs in the I-80 region, but a number of others, as you can see there. They do have access to federal, DOT, congestion mitigation, air quality, and other attributable funding each year, and will be major players in the federal funding that'll come down through the infrastructure bill. So I have a link here for those of you who want to read all the most updated information. Obviously the federal infrastructure bill was passed, and that means that there will be federal money flowing to Ohio for a sustainable transportation and particularly for expansion of the EV charging network. So this is the specific numbers that relate to Ohio, and there's more if you're interested in the actual like road and bridge money and so forth, but 1.4 billion, sorry, over 5 years to improve public transportation options across the state with a focus on sustainability. I've just cherry picked these three here. The second being 140 million over 5 years that will be directly invested in the charging network. And then all of us as entities within Ohio will have the ability to compete for 2.5 billion in federal grants for EV charging. So this isn't planning in the abstract. This is planning that then can go directly towards the application and allocation of federal as well as potentially state and local utility funding, particularly for the EVSE network. So I wanted to flag all of those things just to keep in mind that now is the key time to plan to get out ahead of all this so that when money starts flowing, you know exactly where you want to put in a charger, what kind of charger, have all these pieces in place so that your application is seamless and your deployment is effective. So with that, we're going to open this up to questions. I do see that there's been a number of questions in the chat, so appreciate those of you that have chatted those. I'm gonna take a look at those real quick, maybe voice a couple that haven't been answered yet, and then we can open it up to more questions and answers. As I look at these questions, Marianne or Jenna, anything you want to add before we seek audience feedback?
Yes, I would like to add one thing on the funding side, that in addition to funding available for EV charging, there's also funding available for CNG, mostly on the vehicle side through the CMAQ and DERA programs, I believe. And Andrew, I'm sure you can comment more on that as far as the Ohio situation. And I also believe that some of the competitive grants are broader than just EVSE. I believe they include other alternative fuels as well.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that, Marianne. That is exactly right. A lot of the press releases do focus on EV as kind of the flagship shiny object, if you will, and that's certainly in here in the infrastructure funding. But many of the actual letters of the law speak to cleaner vehicles and then define that within the clean fuel portfolio, including natural gas, propane and other sources as well. So many of these sources, particularly in the competitive grants and some of the formula funding, will be open to other technologies. Thank you for flagging that.
Thank you. And another thing I would like to add is under zero emission options, I'm particularly involved in renewable natural gas. And some of those are very interesting opportunities on the CNG, the heavy duty CNG side, fueling those trucks with renewable natural gas, which has a very low carbon intensity. And there's a lot of activity in that area as well, some of it on the utility side, which is another really interesting opportunity for cleaning up vehicles on I-80.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. And I see a lot of conversation happening in the chat. Appreciate the Intertrust team for fielding a lot of those questions around the platform. But I mean, the big picture on the Intertrust platform is that it is interoperable with any data set. So it's not specifically designed to be a EVSE networking solution per se, but it can take all of that data from whatever your EVSE network is, if you get whether it be the utility, ChargePoint, or others to opt in. The key is, we could visualize all this with GIS, or other sources, but Intertrust both has the easier interoperability and the ability to keep things very secure on the third party's network, so that the utility wouldn't actually have to give us their grid capacity data, just restrict access how they so choose through their partners. Because anyone who's gone forward with deploying a charger knows firsthand, especially if it was a DC fast charger, that coordinating with the utility to know where that capacity is, where the nearest transformers are, do you need to add transformers? Those are some of the immediate big questions that you have to face once you've found, yes, this is the ideal site because of whatever other considerations, traffic counts, registrations, need. Intertrust platform would allow for that coordination and security and user restrictions. There are several other questions about most recent ones. So what are the planned strategies to promote CNG and other fuel usage, particularly from a fleet perspective? Clean Fuels Ohio is certainly working with a range of stakeholders and has been historically. We have over 50 compressed natural gas stations in the state of Ohio with some major users. Most of the public transit fleets are on natural gas now. Many of the refuse fleets, both public and private, are on natural gas, and a number of regional and local delivery companies and municipal governments on natural gas. So we continue to press forward on that front, and addition to that work, much of our work is now focused on transitioning those users to renewable and natural gas for all the benefits that Marianne mentioned, which is basically decarbonization and cost savings for fleet partners through incentives and market trading mechanisms through the renewable fuel standard, the RFS2 that's out at the federal level. With that, would also welcome, I can keep voicing questions in the chat, but if folks want to unmute and chime in, we can hear your voice and talk to you as well.
I'd like to make a comment. My name is Bob Spaz. I'm with Carbon EV Charging, and I know this has to do pretty much with Ohio, but it is for the total corridor up to Nebraska. And just want to make you aware, Nebraska is already, the corridor is about halfway done already. We have installed 51 level 2 and 6 DC fast chargers in Nebraska. And so it covers up to about half the state. So your corridor moving on past the Nebraska border is moving forward. So just want to make you aware of that. And also the I-90 corridor. I know that's another national corridor that's being worked on. We've already received funding for 13 DCs and 13 level 2s. So most of Montana is going to be covered also through the program. So just wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you. Actually, I'd just like to comment that we've been involved in the eastern portion of I-80, but actually the entire I-80 is now designated as an alternative fuels corridor. corridor by virtue of applications from other entities. There was an initial one in California and Nevada, and then all the other pieces have fallen into place as FHWA has had several rounds now of designations. And so, yes, it's a coast-to-coast corridor, and that's why this is such an exciting project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and really, it has to be that coast to coast ideally. So appreciate good partners all across the way. I probably won't be able to do it multitasking, but if anybody has the link to the FHWA designations, there's some great maps from Federal Highway where you can see all the things that Marianne and Bob are describing, and you can see both which stretches or full interstates and other even state routes, US routes are designated, as well as what fuels they're designated for, whether they're signage ready, which means all the stations are in, or signage pending, which means there's a couple gaps yet to be filled. So all of that is available from the Federal Highway Administration to see the national network of corridors, which is really helping pave the way for this next tranche of funding that'll come out through the infrastructure bill. So certainly, now is not the one and only time, but our goal is to, as Jenna detailed, connect with stakeholders along the I-80 corridor. We do not want to do this in a vacuum. So we have been interfacing with folks on more one-to-one basis. This is one of our first forays into more of a public forum, but there will be a number of other outreach and engagement work going forward. But if there are additional thoughts and questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. Double check in the chat. Yeah, I see more conversation about Intertrust and, is this the first time it's being used for a corridor? I think yes and no. This is the first time it's formally being used through this FHWA corridor process, I believe, but Intertrust has a significant amount of work on the West Coast as well as in Europe, including countries like Germany, where they have done planning for EVSE as well as things like solar and other work with cities and states across the US and abroad.
Just to expand on that a little, Andrew, we're also working with a number of energy company entities with regard to the West Coast Clean Transit Initiative, which is the I-5 corridor, which y'all might be familiar with. We're not as far along as we are with Clean Fuels Ohio and a couple of the entities that are involved, but looking forward to it. You made mention, Marianne, it's an exciting time to see the actionable items start playing out for clean energy and EVs in particular. So.
I agree. Thank you so much, Bob. By the way, I put the link to the Alternative Fuels Corridors webpage in the chat. There are maps. That's the main website. There are maps of corridor pending and corridor ready. So you'll see the scope of the program. I believe that round 6 is on hold for the time being. They were waiting to get the results of the infrastructure bill. I don't know if they've actually set a schedule yet, but my understanding is that they are moving ahead at full speed now that there's additional funding and resources available for the program.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And to tag onto that, I would want to highlight great work being done by some of our MPO partners. So certainly, we're talking about across the state, interstate, national corridors that are being designated around certain definitions, like for DC fast charging, it's a fast charger every 50 miles, for example, and within a certain mile distance from the actual the corridors themselves. But beyond that, there's a lot of regional planning that needs to be done, because you don't just travel across the US every day, you travel within your local region and your local, municipality. So there's both regional work that needs to be done by MPOs. Many of our MPO partners in the state are doing great work there. I'll just highlight work done by NOACA in the greater Cleveland area. They've identified a number of regional and local DC fast charging and level 2 sites that they're working towards providing funding directly to now. And great work by others like MVRPC in the Dayton region, who really led the way in getting a number of those VW charging stations funded for their members in their region. So, you know, the corridors aren't the be all and end all. They're one key part that also supports the regional and local charging and fueling stations like natural gas stations at those other levels. Seeing questions about will the slides be available to attendees? Yes, we are recording this and will make information available. The question about when is the deadline to identify the 3 rural counties for our Drive Clean Rural USA project. The deadline is in late spring of next year, but it is going to be first come, first serve. So if you are an interested party or want to make sure you reserve your place in line, please contact us at your earliest convenience. Any other questions or comments from our attendees here? Making sure I didn't miss any in the chat.
Andrew, I can make one last comment. I'm glad you brought up the requirement that the charging be with every 50 miles along the corridor. That's for fast charging, by the way. And for CNG, I believe it's every 150 miles. So it's a little bit different for each fuel because of the different ranges of the vehicles. But there is some discussion that 50-mile number might change because more and more electric vehicles have longer ranges now. But that's still in the rules right now. And the other thing is the charging infrastructure and all the fueling infrastructure needs to be within 5 miles of the center line of the corridor. That's the official ruling.
Yeah, so those are U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration guidelines to qualify for these alternative fuel corridor designations. So that, to Marianne's point, a lot of this is evolving, both the state of the technology of the vehicles, the capacity and range of the vehicles. So that's not meant by US DOT or Federal Highway to be the be all end all and a static, final point, but is what's at least determined to be the minimum for you to have an actual functioning corridor from their perspective. But certainly, to my previous point, that's to help you travel along these corridors. If you're actually going to travel regionally and locally, there also needs to be off corridor charging at your destinations, at your local or regional facilities. So there's more than just this that needs to be done, and some of that is factored into a number of the funding sources that we've touched on today. I do also want to mention as a housekeeping note, we will send out links to the presentation as well as links to a survey. We do want feedback from you as stakeholders along the I-80 corridor. We understand that this isn't necessarily the best format to get everybody's information and input, so we will send out a brief survey. If you can, please fill that out. That'll help inform the work we're doing with this wider team over the coming 2022 timeframe. There will be some follow-up sessions to the last questions. Jenna, maybe you can comment on kind of the overall timeframe and scope of work here.
Yes, we are looking to hold another stakeholder feedback and convening in, I think, March or April, with the project being completed with Argonne releasing a report or finishing the report in June. And to answer the rest of your question, the other states that are involved are New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa, a part of this project.
Great. Well, we really appreciate everyone's participation today. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you to the Intertrust team, to Marianne and Argon, and to Jenna for your participation. We will be following up with what you saw today, as well as that survey, and looking to engage you next year and beyond, as Jenna mentioned. So if you do want more information on any of our other projects that I highlighted, or support in applying for some of those funding sources, please don't hesitate to contact us. Otherwise, have a great rest of your year. Happy early holiday wishes, and we'll look to continue connecting with you throughout 2022. So thank you all.